First of all, I would like to thank you as the Helena Community Foundation for all the good things you do. And I really am very appreciative of this honor, because there's so many people who do so much in terms of using the title philanthropy. But I am grateful for it, and I'm glad I have been able to become one. Well, my parents were Jane and John Delaney. My mother and father both lived in a small village in Nova Scotia. My dad, the Irishman, my mother, the Scotchman. Now, they both came from big families, and so when they were of age, they really had to leave to get out and find employment. So my father came to Butte following his older brother, Pete, to work in the mines in Butte. Now, my mom went down from Edgarnation to Boston and worked as an upstairs maid. And she loved Boston. But she came out with another of my father's brothers in 1915, and my father and mother were married and built our home, which was at that time just pretty lovely. My folks then actually wanted us to have an education. That was, I think, their main goal, because they had not had a great deal of education. They were so smart in so many ways and did a lot to help us. But we were able then to go to private school, Catholic schools, and grade school, high school, and then I went into nurses training, also in Butte. To go to nurses training in Butte, there weren't a lot of options. You know, I'm old, and at that time, a woman could become a nun or get married. That was the goal of most of them, or become a nurse, a nun or a nurse, or maybe a secretary. And some of my classmates in high school, their folks were able to provide college educations, I know. Well, my mom kept an insurance policy for all four of us. The insurance man would come by once a week and collect a quarter for each of us. So by the time I graduated from high school, my mom was able to cash in the insurance policy for $150. And that, believe it or not, paid for the 3 years of my tuition at St. James. The sister who was in charge of the school, she found a means for some of us to go on to school. And I was able, as several of my other classmates, to go on. I went to the University of Minnesota for a specialty in public health, which prepared me to come back and work. I had an obligation to the state. So I came back, and I came to Helena as a school nurse. And I worked here for 4 years. And then I moved to Lake County to be a county nurse. That's a much broader kind of responsibility. I was very active with the Montana Nurses Association. And of course, as a nurse, your main function is to help people and to help them as much as you can, you know, physically, mentally, spiritually. So that was all part of my background and wonderful experience. In 1954, I decided to marry Chum Munger. He was older than me, and he wanted me to marry him, and I did. I had met him as sheriff, and so when I came to Helena, he owned the drive-in theater, Sunset, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but one of the nurses came from the fort, from VA, and asked me what I was doing. Well, I was popping popcorn, and she said, "For God's sake, get to work." So I there was a crisis at the Nurses Association, and I called and they asked me to come up, so I did. And I stayed there for 16 years. I was their executive. And during that time, which was fascinating, we did so much, and I got introduced to legislation. The nurses had very poor working conditions at that time, and they had been trying on their own to do this. And so we decided we needed legislation. There was no state law governing employee rights. And so we introduced a bill. Now I was all new to the legislative process, but I learned. And so it took 3 sessions of the legislature to finally get a bill through that would protect nurses, registered nurses and licensed practical nurses in bargaining. And one of the senators, I don't know if you're familiar with the process, but they put a title of the bill on the status sheet so people know what the legislation is. And one of the senators I was visiting with said, well, call it the blue eyes after her eyes. And so they did. Now, some people made fun of that, but it did give it a personality. And so it's now known as I'm now known as the blue-eyed nurse. Chuck was very, very much a businessman. He didn't have a lot of formal education, but he was very practical and had good judgment. People came to him and wanted land to build a bank. And at first he said he wanted to be on the board, and they rejected that. But they left, and then they came back. He would sell them the land as our part, as partnerships in the bank, which he did. And then, that's the amazing story. After that, he served on the board, and then I served on the board. And so I was on the board, and during that time, we merged with Glacier Bank. And that's the incredible Cinderella story, That's what gave me money. I have this marvelous advisor, Paul Malloy, and I learned about foundations, and so we set up a foundation. By law, with the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws, we have defined our mission. And one of the missions, and my favorite one, is for nursing education. And so we contribute money, that's kind of a permanent thing with the board, to the baccalaureate programs at MSU and Carroll, and then my nursing school in Butte. And that's one of the major contributions. But then in addition to that, we have a part of our mission statement that says we provide shelter, food. There's 4 things, and so we do that, like Food Share, the Mental Health Association, this kids program. The things that provide these services for people. Well, and the other part of this is to try to help my family members understand philanthropy and be able to continue what I've started when I decease. So it's set up that way legally, and it's working fine. We celebrated 10 years this year. In addition to the foundation, I've been able to do other things, like Intermountain. That's one of my favorites. They do so much for these troubled kids. And then another one, and then this year, I got involved for the first time with Habitat for Humanity, and there's been a lot of publicity about that. So I, for the first time, the information about what I have done is public. It's in the newspaper. And so that created a lot of reaction because people here didn't know. But that publicity has been a real inspiration, according to the executive, Jacob, for other people. So I'm grateful for that. And I think this effort that you're making will do the same thing. My parents were so honest about everything, and we did learn from their model and how they treated us, how we treat each other, and how we treated other people. And then that attitude was nourished in the Catholic religion. And so it just seems to me we were always thinking about what we could do to help somebody else. Some people just have a similar background of mine, and they do what they can. And I think it's important for people to know that they're not, but can't, most of them, or a lot of them. Some can and don't. But it's not just a big contribution that makes a difference. It's a lot of small, interested group who give some. And I learned, because of serving on another committee, that really $1,000 is considered a big contribution. And I was surprised about that. But it doesn't have to be even that big, even whatever they can afford. And I think you have to assure people that any kind of contribution is so helpful. And also, I think you have to be very clear about what the person or what the agency does. As you can see, I have had a wonderful career in nursing. So many opportunities. And there again, so many people helped me. And that's true, you don't do anything alone. As you get old, you reminisce a lot about things you did or didn't do. And I know the experts have advised that when you're reminiscing, you may find some conflicts in your life that you should try to resolve before it's your time to go. So, I've been doing that. And there were a few conflicts I haven't done much with. So